Good morning, I am. Thank you very much. Bob, thank you for that generous introduction and that beautiful video. And let me thank the 600,000 members of the IAM for all that you are doing, have done, and will do in creating an economy and a government that works for all of us and not just the 1%. Thank you, IAM. Now, sometimes I get a little bit upset because our kids don't necessarily know much about American history. And they don't know who built the American middle class. They don't know that 100+ years ago, working people throughout this country stood up and fought back, and they told their employers, we're tired of working 70 or 80 hours a week. We're tired of seeing kids working in factories and in fields. Kids belong in schools. And with great courage, they stood up and organized trade unions in this country. And the result of their effort is that millions of people finally had the opportunity to engage in collective bargaining, finally had the opportunity to stand up to their employers and demand dignity and justice on the job. It was the trade union movement in this country that created the middle class, and we thank you for that. And let me be as clear as I can be. Bob was very generous in saying, that I've stood up for working people my whole life. Why wouldn't I? Where do you think I came from? My parents, unlike the current occupant in the White House, did not provide a $200,000 a year allowance for me from the age of 3. Not my life. As I recall, I got a 25-cent a week allowance. I grew up in a 3.5-room, rent-controlled apartment in Brooklyn. For me, it's not hard to understand which side I am on. I come from the working class of this country. I am proud of that, and I will always stand with the working class of this country. And I know what it's like to live in a family that exists paycheck to paycheck. And I think now, a couple of months ago, some of you may recall that President Trump was oh so proud that he shut down the government. Well, maybe if you are a billionaire, you may not know what it's like not to get that paycheck when you need to pay your mortgage or pay your rent or take your kid to the hospital. I will not shut down the government. I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. And I am proud that I have walked the picket lines with workers throughout my entire life, and that I have a 100% pro-union voting record since I've been in Congress. My administration will make no apologies about it. We will be an administration for the working families of this country and not for billionaire campaign contributors. Because we know that the future of the middle class rests in growing the trade union movement We will make it easier for workers to join unions, not harder. The major economic story of our lifetimes is that for the last 40 years, there has been a massive transfer of wealth in this country from the working families to the top 1%, trillions and trillions of dollars. We're going to end that trend, and we're going to move it the other way. It's time that the people on top got a little bit of austerity, not the working families of this country. Now, I know that not a whole lot of folks in Congress talk about it, but I do. It is not only immoral, but it is bad economics when the United States has the most unequal distribution of wealth and income of almost any major country on earth, and it is worse today than in any time since the 1920s. So let me be as clear as I can be. It is not acceptable to me, nor do I think it is acceptable to the American people, that the three wealthiest families in this country own more wealth than the bottom half of the American people. It is not acceptable that 92%, that the top 1% own more wealth than the bottom 92%, and that 49% of all new income today is going to the top 1%. Brothers and sisters, that kind of distribution of wealth and income is not what a democracy is about. It's what an oligarchy is about, and we are not going to let that happen. Over and over again, Donald Trump tells us that the United States economy is absolutely booming. It is, quote unquote, the strongest we've ever had, is, quote unquote, the greatest in the history of America, end quote. Well, that may be true for the members of his Mar-a-Lago Country Club, where the price of admission has doubled to $200,000. For those folks and the wealthiest people in this country, Trump is right. The economy is really booming. In fact, the truth is that the top 1% of our society has never, ever had it so good. But for the middle class and working families of the United States, the truth is that the economy is not quite so great. Many of you will recall President Trump telling us that, quote, companies are giving big bonuses to their workers because of the tax cut bill. Remember that? Well, I know that I will not shock you when I tell you that what the president said is not quite accurate. I know you'll be shocked to hear that, because the president always tells the truth. Truth is that over the past year, the billionaires in America, and this is what is going on in this country today, the billionaires in our country have seen their wealth go up by over $33 million each and every day. Their wealth has gone up by $33 million each and every day. But since the Trump tax plan was signed into law, bonuses for the average worker have gone up by 24 cents a day. So every day since the Trump tax cuts were enacted, Average billionaire in America has seen a $33 million increase in wealth. The average worker gets a bonus of 24 cents. When we talk about a rigged economy, when we talk about an economy in which the very, very rich are getting phenomenally richer, while the middle class continues to struggle and 40 million people live in poverty, that is what we're talking about. And I want you to take a look around you and you ask yourself whether it is appropriate that the 25 wealthiest hedge fund managers on Wall Street make double the income of 140,000 kindergarten teachers in America. 25 hedge fund managers make twice as much as all of the kindergarten teachers in America. Our job together, and this is not going to be easy, and it's why we call it a political revolution, is to change not only the values of this country, but the priorities that exist in Washington, D.C. We don't talk about it very much. You don't see much of it on TV. Fact is that over half of American workers today are living paycheck to paycheck. And what that means when you live paycheck to paycheck is if your car breaks down and you can't get to work because you don't have transportation and you get fired from your job, you can't take care of your kids. Millions of people today live in deep anxiety, worrying what happens if a family member ends up in the hospital because they don't have the money to pay that bill and their family will go bankrupt. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world, and half of our people should not be living in the kind of anxiety they currently are. It is not too much to say that we need an economy that pays our workers decent wages, that provides health care to all of our people, that makes certain that every kid in this country who has the ability can get a higher education regardless of that family's income. That is not a radical idea. That is what this country should be doing. Let me say a word about an issue that I know is of concern to the IAM and to the American people, but we don't hear a whole lot of it being discussed in the Congress. And that is the retirement crisis facing a nation which is becoming older and older. In America today, about half of older Americans, those who are 55 and older, have no retirement savings. Got that? So you are 58 years of age, you have worked your entire life, you're going to retire in 7 years, you got nothing in the bank. And we ask ourselves why the American people are stressed out. Today, 1 out of every 3 senior citizens in America receive their Social Security check is the only check that they receive. And 20% of seniors are trying to live on an income of $13,500 or less. Think about that for a moment. You are 80, 85 years of age. You got health care needs, you got to keep the house warm, you need to eat. You're trying to live on $13,500 a year or less. All of you know that the Republican leadership in the Congress, after giving huge tax breaks to billionaires, they think it's just a great idea to cut Social Security. That's what they mean when they talk about entitlement reform. When you hear entitlement reform, that's a code word for cutting Social Security. So I've got some news for that Republican leadership. The American people will not tolerate cuts to Social Security. Quite the contrary. We are going to expand benefits for those who are on Social Security. And let us not forget, when we are talking about the retirement crisis, we are not just talking about expanding and extending Social Security, as important as that is. If Congress does not get its act together, the earned pension benefits of more than 1.5 million workers and retirees in multi-employer pension plans could be cut by up to 60%. Brothers and sisters, when a worker is promised a pension, that promise must not be broken. And that is why I have introduced and will reintroduce legislation to make sure that the pensions of every worker in a multi-employer retirement plan is not cut. They get 100% of what they were promised. Now, my Republican colleagues, they say that we can't afford the $30 billion price tag for this legislation. Well, I find it hard to understand as to how we can come up with trillions of dollars to bail out the crooks on Wall Street 10 years ago, and somehow we cannot come up with $30 billion to keep a promise made to the workers of this country. Furthermore, let us be clear, corporate America and the billionaire class have been waging a 40-year war against the trade union movement in America. When Donald Trump appoints some of the most anti-union members to the National Labor Relations Board, make no mistake about it, he is waging a war against workers. When billionaires like the Koch brothers spend millions of dollars successfully lobbying for so-called right-to-work laws, they are waging a war on working people. When companies disgracefully threaten to shut down factories in America if their workers vote to form a union, they are waging a war on working people. The question we have to ask ourselves is this: why does the billionaire class in corporate America dislike the trade union movement so much? And the answer is quite obvious. In America today, union workers earn 22% more on average than non-union workers. In America today, 72% of union workers have a defined benefit pension plan that guarantees an income in retirement, compared to just 14% of non-union workers. What the billionaire class understands is that if they can destroy organized labor, if they can destroy the ability of workers to engage in collective bargaining and earn decent wages and decent benefits, if they destroy the ability of working people to come together and fight politically for a Congress that represents them and not just the wealthy. If they can do all that, who in America is left to stop their greed? And the answer is nobody is. The trade union movement is the last line of defense for the working families of this country. So let us be very clear about what we have to do, and I look forward to doing it with you. And that is, we have to rebuild, strengthen, and expand the trade union movement in America. The facts are quite clear. There are millions of workers throughout this country who want to join unions. But there are employers throughout this country who, in many cases, illegally are preventing them from doing that. We need elected officials and candidates at every level to get serious about speaking out for the trade union movement. This should not be an afterthought. If we're talking about growing wages in this country, providing health care to all people in this country, having a progressive tax system, the trade union movement must be in the middle of all of those discussions. Let me say a word about some of the issues that the IAM is currently dealing with right now. So all of you know, American Airlines wants to slash the pay of its employees. They want to outsource jobs. They want to take away health care benefits, and they want to abolish its defined benefit pension plan. Brothers and sisters, together, we are not going to allow that to happen. And here is the main point to be made. American Airlines is not a poor, struggling company. Last year, it made a net profit of $1.4 billion. This is a company, and this is what is going on all across this country, not only in the airline industry. This is a company, American Airlines, that had enough money to pay its CEO, Doug Parker, over $19 million in compensation last year. This is a company that had enough money to buy back $15 billion of its own stock during a 5-year period. So today I say to the CEO of American Airlines, if you have enough money to buy back $15 billion of your own stock, you damn well have enough money to pay your workers a decent wage with good benefits. And this is exactly what the American people are sick and tired of. It's not just American Airlines. It is companies that are making good profits in America, and then they shut down and they move to some desperate developing country. It is companies that merge with another company, and the first thing that they do is try to cut back on the health care benefits of their workers. The American people are sick and tired of the greed of corporate America. Enough is enough. And together, and I want to make a point here that I made all over this country. Slogan of our campaign is not me, it is us. And I say that not just because it could make a good bumper sticker, probably will, but here is the point that very few public officials will tell you. And that is that no president, not somebody who is well-intentioned, not somebody who is honest, can do it alone. Media don't talk about it too much. You don't hear about it discussed in Congress, but I think you all understand it. And that is, the power structure of America is such that when you have entities like Wall Street that have assets equivalent to 54% of the GDP in America, 6 major banks, 54% assets of the GDP in this country. When you have pharmaceutical industries, companies that have unlimited amounts of money to spend. When you have insurance companies, we have a fossil fuel industry. We are taking on not just Donald Trump and the Republican Party. We are taking on the incredible power of the billionaire class and corporate America. So when we talk about us, not me, what I understand is that real change never, ever comes from the top on down. That's the history of the trade union movement. That's the history of the civil rights movement. That's the history of the women's movement, the history of the gay movement. It is when millions of people look about them and they say, you know what, how does it happen that CEOs get huge compensation packages, but they don't pay workers a decent wages? How does it happen that companies that make billions in profits shut down in the United States and move abroad? How does it happen that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people? And finally, people look around them and they say, this is not what America is about. We're going to change it. We're going to make a political revolution. When we are in the White House together, we are going to put pro-worker appointees on the NLRB, yes. Not stooges, but big business. This country today is lagging behind many other industrialized nations in terms of our rail system. When we are in the White House, we are going to reject Trump's efforts to gut Amtrak, and we're going to turn and we're not going to allow anyone to turn good-paying union jobs into outsourced contract jobs. I want this country to lead the world in terms of our rail, so we are going to fully fund Amtrak and invest in high-speed rail. When we together are in the White House, we are going to pass the Workplace Democracy Act that I will soon be reintroducing in the Senate. And I want you all to hear what this legislation is about, because it is the most significant labor legislation introduced in a very, very long time. Under this legislation, when a majority of workers in a bargaining unit sign valid authorization cards to join a union, they will have a union, period. And if employers refuse to negotiate in good faith, we will impose strong penalties on those companies. Under this legislation, companies will no longer be able to ruthlessly exploit their employees by misclassifying them as independent contractors or deny them overtime by falsely calling them supervisors. And under this legislation, we will end once and for all the disastrous right-to-work laws in 28 states and we're going to do that by repealing Section 14B of the Taft-Hartley Act. Brothers and sisters, if we are going to create an economy that works for all people, we need to put an end to a corrupt campaign finance system that allows billionaires to buy elections. I may be old-fashioned, but to me, what democracy is about is one person, one vote, not billionaires spending hundreds of millions of dollars to elect candidates who represent the wealthy and the powerful. And when we are in the White House again, we're going to put an end to something that really is vulgar and disgusting. And that is this. You know, I've been in politics a long time, run for office in Vermont, many, many occasions. Sometimes I've lost, and sometimes I've won. But it has never, ever occurred to me to try to figure out a way that I could keep people from voting because they might be voting against me. So I tell all of these cowardly Republican governors all over this country who are trying to suppress the vote, who are trying to make it harder for people of color, for poor people, for young people to vote. If you don't have the guts to engage in free, fair, and open elections, get the hell out of politics and get another job. You know, that is such a fundamental aspect of the America we grew up in. That's what democracy is about. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. You got your ideas, you got your ideas. But the idea that you go out of your way to make it harder for people to vote because they may vote against you is so un-American that it is really disgraceful. Now, over the last several years, as I've talked about, rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, making public colleges and universities tuition-free, et cetera, et cetera. Many of my critics, and they are legion, they say, well, Bernie, that's a great idea, you're a nice guy. How are you going to pay for all of this stuff? So let me be very clear as to exactly how we are going to pay for it. Anybody here know how much in federal income taxes Amazon paid last year? Same thing for Netflix, same thing for General Motors, same thing for IBM, same thing for Federal Express, same thing for John Deere, same thing for Berkshire Hathaway. Companies that make billions and billions of dollars did not pay one nickel in federal income tax. And we have an international system of such massive corruption that it is almost hard to imagine, where all over the world, not just in the United States, large corporations and billionaires stash their wealth in tax havens like the Cayman Islands and Bermuda, so they can avoid paying their fair share of taxes. I believe that the American people are sick and tired of billionaires and the wealthy not paying their fair share of taxes. Trump gave these guys $1.5 trillion in tax breaks. We're going to rescind those tax breaks, and we are going to demand that the wealthy and powerful start paying their fair share of taxes. Now, 4 years ago, when I said that in America, if you work 40 hours a week, you should not be living in poverty, I was told that that was too radical an idea. Well, I said then, and I say now, that we need a minimum wage in this country, which is a living wage, $15 an hour at least. And I'm proud to tell you that 6 states have already passed legislation to do that. The House of Representatives, I believe, in a short period, will be doing exactly that. And we need to put pressure on the Senate to follow the House lead. And when we talk about fair wages, we need to end the obscenity of women making just 80 cents on the dollar compared to men. Equal pay for equal work. Let me say a word about another issue I've been talking about for years, which also a few years ago seemed so very radical. So let me be as straightforward as I can be. To my mind, health care is a human right, not a privilege. Every other major country on earth guarantees health care to all people, and yet we spend today twice as much per capita. We're now spending almost $11,000 per person on health care, unsustainable. We're spending twice as much on health care as any other nation, and yet our life expectancy is going down, and our health care outcomes are often not as good as other countries. And also what we are seeing is virtually every time a contract expires, unions are forced to negotiate to maintain their health care benefits, and often when they do that, they have to give up wage increases. So my view is that the time is long overdue for the United States to do what every other major country on earth does, and that is to pass a Medicare for all single-payer program. Together, when we are in the White House, we're going to rewrite our failed trade policies. And here's the radical idea. Maybe trade legislation should benefit workers, not just wealthy CEOs. But that's what we're going to do. And one way you do it is you end this absurdity that you have a company shuts down in America, moves abroad, makes billions of profits, and then they come to the federal government and they say, hey, give us a federal contract. Well, my view is if you want a federal contract, treat your workers with respect and dignity. Don't shut down factories in America. Go abroad and then think you're going to get a federal handout. Brothers and sisters, let me be as honest as I can with you. We got a heck of a lot of work in front of us. The opposition is incredibly powerful. They have unlimited amounts of money. But this is what I believe from the bottom of my heart. Donald Trump's and his allies' political strategy is not complicated. Trust me, they're not going to be running 30-second TV ads saying, hey, vote for us. We threw 30 million people off of health care. Vote for us. We want to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and education. Vote for us. We don't think climate change even exists. That's not what they are going to be doing. Their strategy is very, very clear. They hope to win by dividing the American people up based on the color of our skin, based on where we were born, based on our religious beliefs, based on our sexual orientation, even based on our gender. They want to divide us up. You're against you, and you're against you. And they hope that by doing that, they can win an election. Our campaign and our government are going to be doing exactly the opposite. We are going to bring the American people together. Black and white and Latino, gay and straight, native-born and immigrant, no matter what your religion is, we come together. We come together, no matter where we came from, no matter who we are. We come together by the millions to stand up for justice, for economic justice, social justice, racial justice, and environmental justice. Now, the 1% in this country has unlimited amounts of money, they truly do, and they have incredible power. But at the end of the day, the 1% is 1%. And I may not be a Nobel Prize winning mathematician, but I do know that the 99% have a hell of a lot more people than the 1%. So our job is to bring our 99% together to fight for an agenda that works for the children, that works for working families, that works for the elderly, that works for the poor, that works for the environment, that works for racial justice, for immigration justice. And when we do that, when we stand together, when our workers are organized in strong unions, when we do that, there is nothing at all that will stop us from creating the greatest nation that we could possibly imagine. So I ask all of you, let's stand together, let us go forward, let us transform this country. Thank you, IAM.